Hi, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Angel DeSantis. I am a yoga instructor and I talk about religious trauma. And in this video, I wanted to talk about the ability to see time or not when you grow up in religious trauma. And religious trauma's main message is that the world is basically bad, and so are you. And it starts there. It starts with you are probably flawed in all these different ways. It has a list of ways that you're flawed, and then you have a list of ways that the world is flawed. And as you grow through life, they need to continue to harp on these things because it's the way of controlling you, because that way they can tell you what you need to do to fix yourself and what you can do in the world to fix the world, because both of those things are bad. And for me, growing up as a child, I grew up in a cult called the Children of God. For me growing up, what that taught me to do was to have an overactive fear response and to only look for threats. So my amygdala, it's a part of the brain that is responsible for the fear response, that was always going off because I was always worried that I was bad and the world was bad. And so I was always trying to stay out of trouble or say the right thing. And so the personality that develops is not your personality, it is a fear based personality where you're trying to elicit the right response from people because you're really afraid. And then my response to the world was like, let me fix it because it's bad. And then I didn't want to leave the cult because I didn't want to join the world because the world was bad. So why would you want to leave something that was, quote, good, something that was claiming to be good for something that you were taught is bad? And the way this works in kind of stunting my development in the actual world is that when you become really, really afraid, or when your foundation in your brain about yourself and about the world is one of assuming that it is basically bad and there are things to fear, then that's what you look for and that's what you find. Because if you feel like you're basically flawed, and also the things that religion tells you are your flaws, like whatever it is. I'm not going to list out. There's a bunch of lists, but all the things that they tell you about yourselves that you're bad, like you talking back, something like that. You will start to catch yourself and you will start to police yourself, and you'll notice all the bad things about yourself because you will misdiagnose things that are proper and part of your personality and part of the human experience. You will label them as bad. And then being out in the world, it's like somebody gets angry in traffic and yells, and I'm like, oh my God, that's a threat. And I see somebody smoking, and I'm like, oh my God, there's another threat. Because those were all the things I was taught were threats. So then I just end up in this constant hypervigilant state in the world, wondering where the next threat is coming from. And what that does is it keeps me super stressed out, super high cortisol levels, and it never allows me to calm down and actually look at my life and actually think long term. Because the other thing that religious trauma will do a lot of times is they do the threat of hell, or they do the threat of Jesus coming back. And I had both. So the cult that I was in was an apocalyptic cult. So Jesus, we always never knew when Jesus would come back, but it was probably sometime this week. So my brain literally could not fathom time. I did not know what time was because I was always right about to die. Like I could die by the end of the day, or I'm definitely going to die in a few days. And so what that did is I'm constantly in fight or flight. I'm constantly waiting for the end of the world, and I have no ability to see ahead. So if you know my story, then you know that I didn't want to leave the cult. I was with a boyfriend who became a husband later, and he wanted to go to college. And I couldn't even fathom that he could think 4 years ahead. Like that for me blew my mind. For me, it was like talking about having like $45 billion in the bank, where it's like fun to say, but I can't actually fathom it. I have no idea what it's like to have $45 billion in the bank. And that was like those thoughts were on equal level. The ability to say I'm going to do college for 4 years was equal to me to saying I want $45 in the bank. They were both equally just unfathomable. I never saw time. And so that followed me out, because even again, after I left the cult physically, I didn't leave mentally, because I had to go in and just do a bunch of cognitive work. And something that was really, really useful for me was learning how to calm down my fear response. And it was like, this was here and this was here. And as I started to calm my fear response, I started to be able to see time better. And as I'm able to continue to quiet that fear response, I'm able to see time a lot more clearly. And the thing that time gives you is hope. But if you're in a constant state of fearfulness and only picking out the bad things in yourself and the bad things in the world, and then if you try to add time on top of that, then the world is only going to get worse and you are only going to get worse because you were trained to see only negative things. So I want to um, suggest I want to suggest that you look at anxiety in regards to the amygdala and how to calm down your amygdala. And I will link something up here because I think it's really important, because that is something that I see a lot with not just ex-members of the cult that I was in, but just in talking to people about religious trauma. A lot of us grew up with the threat of hell. And as a 6-year-old or as a 5-year-old or a 9-year-old, you believe the things that your parents tell you. And I mean, I guess they believed it too, but an 8-year-old child shouldn't be worried that they're not going to live to the end of the day. And if that was you, and if you did feel that, you felt the threat of hell, then it might be possible that you have an overactive amygdala and you are trained to pick out threats more than you are trained to pick out calm. So let me just look at my notes. I was going to say that you have 40, 60, or 80 years left to your life. And for me, that was always a horrible thing until I learned to see time properly. And once I was able to see time with the lens of healing and with the lens of, wow, I get my life back, then it became a good thing that I have 60 years left, or like 80 years because I'm Asian, so I'm going to live forever. But if when I said that, your brain went, nope, because you never know, I could get in a car accident, or I could, my plane could crash or whatever. Great, notice that, because that might mean that you have an overactive amygdala. And again, are trained to look for the things that could go wrong and the potential threats around you. Because again, religious trauma teaches you, you are bad and the world is bad. And you are not bad, and you are capable of doing bad action. And obviously in the world, there is plenty of evil. But if you grew up in a religious environment, it's very likely that you will be skewed in your view of what is bad versus what is good, and also how much of either thing there is. Because I used to believe that the world was like 80% evil and 20% good. And then that makes it super scary to live in, because if something is 80% evil, why would you want to go into it? But that's the belief that they need you to hold in order to keep you in something that is actually the evil thing. But if you are now no longer part of a religious community that you are now realizing was abusive, it's important to look at how your brain might have developed, because there is a reason that you feel certain things or think certain thoughts or look at life in a certain way. And it is also likely, if they've had your brain for long enough, that all of these things were trained into you and they are not actually your actual natural thoughts. And so I'm going to leave a link for the amygdala. And I just really encourage you to look at, like, if you think about living for the next 40 or 60 years, is that exciting, or is that like just the worst news? And have you ever thought about your life? And for some of you, maybe you have. I just know for me, I was always under the threat of hell, and I never looked at what does my life look like in 4 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. And it's not that now you map out your life and you try and go get it. It's that if you're feeling a certain type of way, this is how it was healing for me, is when I was feeling bad about myself, or when I was feeling like, oh my God, I have so far to go, then I would also remember, you know what, I have 10 years to fix it, or I have 5 years to fix it. And this is just a moment in time. And as I continue to on my journey to grow and to heal, 6 months from now it'll be a different story. A year from now it'll be a different story. So sometimes when you grow up in traumatic environments, it really, your fear response is overreactive, and it keeps you trapped in a cycle of being unable to see past a certain amount of time. So I would encourage you to look at the amygdala, to look at yourself, and to let yourself take a breath and start to look at the good in the world. What is good about yourself and what is good about the world? Because again, religious trauma teaches you you are bad and the world is bad. So as you're trying to undo it, look at yourself. There's a lot of good there. So start to identify the good that's there, because there 100% there is good stuff in you, and you just got to identify it. And it will be mislabeled if you grew up in an abusive environment or in a religiously abusive environment. So there's good stuff in you. It's there. You can find it. And there's really good stuff in the world, and it's there, and you can find it. So that is my video this week. If there is anything that has helped you to find good stuff in yourself or to find good stuff in the world, always leave it below, leave it in the comments. People see it, and it does help. Otherwise, I hope that you have a wonderful week. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you next time.